Like, go. Is that what I'm doing? It's like we're on. It's like live. Is that what I'm hearing? Hi, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday's edition of Cannabis Chat. I'm Jimmy Young in the Pro Cannabis Media Studios. And every Wednesday, we talk with educators and people who have something to teach us. And Lord knows there's so much to learn about this amazing cannabis sativa plant. And we are just the people to bring it to you live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 4 p.m. Eastern to 6 p.m. Eastern. And then we usually end up with either a We Talk News at the end or In the Weeds at the end. So there's always some kind of program that's following our live stream. And speaking of live streams, because we are now moving into the holiday season, we here at Pro Cannabis Media are going to provide our followers some binge watching. If you want to learn about cannabis, you're going to have a great opportunity during the week of December 21 to December 24th. That's Monday through Thursday next week. That's when we will be sharing with you on social media, our Facebook and our YouTube audience, 12 hours of the best of programming from Pro Cannabis Media. There will be interviews. I just found out today that since September 9th, I've done about 105 interviews. I'm a nut, obviously, a glutton for punishment. But more importantly, there's so much information out there now with the people that we've talked to, and we're so grateful for that, and even more grateful for the people that do get that little notification on your smartphone. Tune in, check it out. I don't care if you look or not, you just want to listen. That's awesome too. We have 3 great guests coming up today. And one is the Director of Education from the Cleveland School of Cannabis. We haven't talked to the Cleveland School of Cannabis for a few weeks, so I kind of miss those people. That will be Nicole Fenix, and she is the School of Education Director, and she'll be joining us at the bottom of this hour. And then following that, I've got 2 new friends in the greater Massachusetts area. It's an owner of a dispensary and his COO, and that is Scott Winters and Rob DiFazio from the CNA Dispensaries out in the Amesbury and Haverhill area. And if you don't really know where that is on a map and you're not from Massachusetts, it's not that big a deal. It's north of the city. Let's just leave it at that. All just about a stone's throw from the border of New Hampshire. For those of you who understand how New England works, with Rhode Island and Connecticut on the bottom, Massachusetts in the middle, Vermont, New Hampshire, and then the great state of Maine. That would be your New England states. And I can tell you, within the next 24 hours, there's going to be an awful lot of snow in those states. In fact, I think everybody on the eastern seaboard is going to get buried by about a foot and a half of snow. So why do we live here again? I just, it's not like I'm a skier. That was one of the biggest mistakes of my life growing up, was not learning how to ski at a young age, because it would have made the winters a lot shorter. Now, with them beginning like tomorrow, actually, it's been like in the 20s here in Massachusetts the last couple of days, but really cold. We're going to get instant winter. And I'm pretty sure that the winter solstice isn't until next Monday, December 21st, if my history reminds if my memory's still there, and it is somewhat there. So let's see, I was doing the lineup of today's show. We've got Nicole Fenix at the bottom of this hour. At the top of the hour, the next hour, we've got 2 guys that run a dispensary in the Massachusetts area. And then in the final half hour, it's time to grow. That's right. We're going to grow with a grower, or somebody at least who understands growing and cultivation. And his name is Jordan Stauder, and Commercial Cultivation Advisor at GrowRay Lighting Technologies. We'll figure out all what that means, but he is a grower, and he'll talk about the challenges of growing cannabis indoors. Because if you're going to grow cannabis in New England, especially in the wintertime, it better be indoors, because you're not going to be able to grow it outside in the frigid winter temperatures and the snow that seems to be all around us in a very short period of time. It's, winters are winters in New England. Last year's winter in New England was it barely existed. I think we had something like 14 inches of snow the entire winter. And now they're predicting that much snow in one storm. So it could be a long winter for the Boston area and the New England area. And of course, if you're watching us in other states, we love it if you check in on our chat room. We do have people in our chat room to chat with you and answer any of your questions on any of the subjects that we might be talking about, or something that, oh, excuse me, might interest you. Boy, it only took me 5 minutes before my voice started to strain. I don't know if anybody saw President-elect Joe Biden do his speech. I think it was last night or the night before. The poor guy had a frog in his throat and he was coughing through half the speech, and nobody took a timeout or gave him some water. Luckily, I brought my own water, and I will calm down my inflection and calm down my projection so I might be able to actually talk over the next 2 hours and conduct some interesting interviews, because that's my job. That's what I'm doing. Now, we already talked about the live streams that are coming up next week. A reminder that on Friday, this coming Friday, and that would be in December, and it would be 2 days after today. So I think that's December 18th without looking at my calendar. December 18th. Okay. That will be our last live show from the Pro Cannabis Media's studio for 2020, because we're going on tape. We're going to show you the best of. We're going to stream live 12 hours from 10 to 10 on Facebook and YouTube. And of course, the Pro Cannabis Media, I believe the Pro Cannabis Media website will also be taking that, although there may be a technical snafu for that, but just go to Facebook or YouTube. I can pretty much guarantee you'll see tons of programming live streaming those days. On Friday, David Rabinovitz will be joining me with the Green Rush on Friday show. That's when we talk about the business of cannabis, and we talk about the little issues having to do in cannabis. David usually joins us in studio, but he too has been remote during this pandemic, at least over the last few weeks, as the cases have started to climb. And I pretty much told everybody to stay away, stay home. And it's amazing that we can actually remote broadcast this live stream and these interview shows that we do. Technology is pretty amazing. I do want to talk a little bit about one of the guests that we're going to have on Friday, because he's a pretty well-known guy. In fact, if you follow the cannabis industry, you've probably heard of Steve D'Angelo. He's the guy that kind of looks like Willie Nelson. He's got are they pigtails? They're braids. They're really long hair braids. And Steve and his brother Andrew are the co-founders of Harborside, which is a dispensary and company out of California that is publicly traded in the Canadian Stock Exchange. And they've been involved with the legalization movement in California really since its inception. In fact, Steve, I believe he was originally from the DC area, because he tried to legalize cannabis in the 70s in DC, and then realized it would probably be a lot easier to do that on the West Coast, where it does seem to be a far more progressive area, California, about the most progressive as you can get. So Andrew D'Angelo, I'm flipping through my newsletters today, as I always do every day as I go through my emails. And I come across a byline from Andrew D'Angelo, and it was from our friends at Playboy. What can I tell you? You know, I used to read the articles, I swear. Andrew D'Angelo is the brother of Steve, and he is known in Playboy as the dope tutor. That's what it says. It says right there, the dope tutor, Andrew D'Angelo. And the question on his article is it okay to give pot as a present? Well, people have been skirting the rules for a long time in the legal cannabis movement, or getting around the rules as far as selling it, because they've been gifting cannabis for a long time. And in fact, Dinner at Mary's, our friend Sam, they have catered meals where they give you the meal and then they gift you some infused cannabis oil that, of course, is a gift. So you could do whatever you want with it. You could put it in the food that they share with you, that you buy, or, you know, you could just put it on the side if you want. Or again, gift it to somebody else who might want to enjoy infused food during this holiday season. So Andrew D'Angelo, he's there's a couple of things. I'm just going to read you a couple of things from this article because it's obviously a reflection on his life. And he says, your dope tutor learned in those early years that cannabis-based pleasure transcends the baseline human experience. It elevates it. Some even say you can kiss the sky when you feel high enough. I'm just reading. These aren't my words. These are Andrew's words. And of course, he also sees it as an art form. Pairing weed with other experiences can provide a true lift in the good living department, and sharing that pairing with people you care about, because after all, sharing is caring, right? And of course, then he gets into it's Playboy. So you know he's going to talk about having sex on weed. Duh, right? So he talks about it. Doesn't get too graphic, okay? It's not like letters and forum. Not that I would know about that. Let's see. So part of mindful art of living your best weed life. That's what this article is all about. And sure enough, the idea of giving cannabis as a gift is approved by the dope tutor himself, Andrew D'Angelo. Headline, NBA won't be testing players for cannabis this year. I got news for you. People in the NBA, players in the NBA, have been using weed for decades. And the testing of cannabis in the NBA has always been kind of a wink, wink joke, if you will. I remember the 70s in the NBA. There was a guy named Michael Ray Richardson. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember him, but he had his little issues with all sorts of drugs. In fact, I believe the drug of choice back then was cocaine. But Larry Bird and Magic Johnson come along, and sure enough, they saved the league, if you will. And that was 1979, 1980. Obviously, Magic and Larry had a great rivalry through the 80s and really put the NBA back on the map behind David Stern's leadership as commissioner. And cannabis and basketball have always kind of been one of those wink, wink arrangements that nobody really cared about. But now they've made it official. They won't be testing for cannabis in this season. And in fact, the NBA Players Association director, her name is Michelle Roberts, and she just joined Cresco Labs board. So there you go. Somebody who's pro-cannabis is involved with the National Basketball Association Players Association. Fantastic. I can also throw in this little sports tidbit because when it comes to filling time, I always resort back to my sports youth. Well, I'm not going to talk about my athletic ability, but sports in general. This month's edition of Sports Illustrated is their Sportsman of the Year edition, Sportswoman, Sportsmen of the Year. And they basically recognize the activist athlete. And growing up, the king of the activism athletes, to me, was the greatest boxer of all time, Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali refused to be inducted into the U.S. Armed Forces in the 60s and became a symbol for the anti-war movement. It was someone I looked up to because he believed in something, he stood up for it, and they stripped his heavyweight crown, and they kept appealing and appealing and appealing that he had a right, a conscientious, objective right to not report because he had just become a Muslim. And sure enough, Muhammad Ali won his case before the Supreme Court and didn't go to jail. In fact, after not fighting for a couple of years, he came back and fought, I think it was Jerry Quarry first, and then Joe Frazier in Madison Square Garden, and lost for the first time, which, by the way, was heartbreaking for this 13-year-old kid, okay? I was really kind of upset when all that happened. But he came back, he won the title 3 more times, and that's why he is the greatest. And the Muhammad Ali Award this year went to LeBron James of the NBA champion LA Lakers. And it does hurt me to say that as a Celtics fan. However, I do respect LeBron James for his activism. And they had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar write the article about LeBron James as the activist athlete. And he related a couple of stories about Muhammad Ali that were awesome. It's a great read. I'm sure it's available online as well, even if you're not a Sports Illustrated subscriber like I have been pretty much my entire life. In fact, I remember when it was a weekly, now it's a monthly. Another reflection of the times, right? So that's the sports little moment I had for you. I can tell you this, that there's now a new prediction about the U.S. legal cannabis market. They're now predicting, they being, let's see who these guys are. I know who they are. It's a research firm, New Frontier Data. The legal cannabis market in 2025, which is only 5 years away, it's estimated to be a $41 billion market. That's pretty amazing. That would be legal, medical, and recreational legal sales. That's pretty amazing. And let's see. It's also predicting around 39% of the total annual cannabis demand in the U.S. will be answered through legal transactions by 2025. Right now, it is not 39%. I don't know what the percentage is, but I know it's not 39%. I know that Humboldt County in California actually dominates the illegal trade. I think they provide 80% of the illegal trade in cannabis comes out of Humboldt County, which is pretty amazing. Okay, so that is a factoid. I found this interesting. As you know, we are right in the middle of a pandemic, and there are plenty of people out there who have been suffered because of that. But there's another health issue that has been wreaking havoc in the United States during my entire lifetime, and of course, it is the fight against cancer. Well, guess what? There's now a recent study by a guy by the name of Thomas Clark. He's a PhD, and his recent analysis is that cannabis is an excellent tool in the war against cancer. Now, I've been floating this idea for a long time. I even wrote a blog about 1937. The wrong drug got legalized and prohibited. They prohibited cannabis and legalized alcohol. Bad move. That being said, in the words of Clark, the guy who did this research, decreased cancer risk in cannabis users should not be surprising, as cannabis and cannabinoids decrease obesity, inhibit chronic inflammation, reduce fasting insulin levels and insulin sensitivity, and have direct anti-tumor actions. Now, those of you who follow science and medicine and research, again, another study coming out basically saying, you know what? If you are a regular smoker of cannabis or ingester of cannabis, if you're an edible person or a tincture person, you're actually building up your immune system to fight off cancer cells. I mean, it makes sense. And we're going to talk to some of these people about the endocannabinoid system. In fact, our first guest coming up in just about 10 minutes or so is an instructor on the endocannabinoid system. And she will explain to us about this very research and the study and how the endocannabinoid system interacts with all your neurotransmitters in your body. In fact, I think we heard the green nurse herself, Sherry Tutkus, say this on Monday. The endocannabinoid system is the most important system in our bodies because it balances all those neurotransmitters that involve the brain and pain, and it builds the immune system up. I mean, it's just amazing. Well, that is going to be my monologue for the show, and I don't know if you can tell, but I'm definitely having a challenge with my voice. So I'm going to, again, lower my volume. And we're going to talk about the 420 code. If you don't know the origin of the 420 code, it's all about these high school students from San Rafael, California in 1971. They called themselves the Waldos. And sure enough, at 4:20, they would meet after school across the street at the Louis Pasteur statue, and I'm sure it's still there in San Rafael, California, and they would catch a buzz. Law enforcement caught on, being those perceptive public safety servants that they are, and started using the code 420 to describe illegal consumption in public about cannabis going on 420 at the corner of Vine and Main Street. Check it out. And then the cannabis community found out about that, embraced it, and that's why April 20th is a holiday for the cannabis community and a celebration. And it's why if you go to any of these cannabis conventions, when and if they ever come back, everybody takes a break at 4:20. So with that in mind, we too will take a break, and we will listen to the sounds of a guy that, well, let's just say he wasn't part of the Waldos, but he was certainly part of the Youngos, because whenever we heard Shanty on the radio in the 70s, it was a signal for us to go around the corner and put a good buzz on. So sit back, enjoy Shanty with Jonathan Edwards, and we'll be back with our first guest coming up after this break.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean, I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the
Hey.
Green Nurse Podcast.
Woo!
We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. This is the Cannabis Chat program that is dedicated to talking to educators in the cannabis community. And one of our favorite places to check in on is the Cleveland School of Cannabis. And Nicole Fenix joins us, and you are an educational director for them. Is that correct, Nicole?
That's correct. Yes, the director of education. So they've changed their titles a couple different times, but that's the current one. Yes, the director of education.
Every
So-
time they change your title, I'm sure you get a raise, right?
right, and more work. No, yeah, just the more work part.
I
No, but
kid.
it's great. I love it. It's really coming from work.
Uh-oh, she froze. That's never a good sign when they freeze, especially at the beginning of an
Master's in
interview.
curriculum and writing. So it's been kind
All right, you're back.
of. Oh,
You just
yeah,
you just
sorry.
froze for a few seconds there, Nicole.
Okay.
You with us?
I'm here. Yep.
Okay, it's all good. Let's talk a little bit about what you do teach at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. And it says here, it's the weekly classes on the endocannabinoid system. Again, can you define what that endocannabinoid system is for those who may not be privy to that?
Wow. I guess the simplest way to describe it is that it maintains our stability in our body. It keeps us healthy. So when it's not working properly, our body is out of stability. So it controls the homeostasis for all of our systems. So it's just like our cardiovascular system, our endocrine system, our digestive system. So it's just another system that was just recently discovered in the early 1990s. So but it maintains all of our systems in our body. So that's what its main function is. And it obviously in much more greater detail than that, but that's it in a nutshell.
Right, absolutely. A stabilizer. Now, during this pandemic, as we know, a couple of interesting things have happened with cannabis. One, of course, is in many states, they have deemed medicinal cannabis as an essential part of the economy, and they kept open cannabis dispensaries. Maybe
Mhm.
not in Massachusetts at the adult use level, but they did keep open the medical dispensaries in Massachusetts. And I wonder, do you feel or do you know any anecdotal research that those who might be partaking, I'd love to see the percentage of those who use cannabis and if they've had COVID or not, have they been able to beat it? Has it been more severe? I don't think we've seen any of that data unless you're privy to that.
I'm not. I do have both my daughters had COVID. My son and I did not get it. We live in the same house. My son is a medical card user. I use large amounts of CBD, and we both remained healthy. So I don't know. Take it for what it's worth. But yeah, there's been a lot of people using cannabis, obviously with the anxiety that COVID has brought and financial instability. So I think it's really been useful for a lot of people that have had added stress to their lives, for sure. And they've seen it in the numbers. I mean, the sales of numbers have definitely gone up. So, you could correlate that if you'd like.
Right. You know what? In the cannabis community, I think we correlate whatever is supporting the story, because it does seem like there's more and more research and new studies that come out almost every day. We talked to a researcher in Canada, Dr. Igor Kovalchuk. He had done 3D modeling on the COVID virus and cannabis.
Mhm.
And that is by far the most watched interview that we've done over the last year. I think we've had something like 15,000 views
Wow.
of that interview. And
Yeah.
again, I found it fascinating that he was doing it with 3D modeling. The science behind this is just remarkable to me.
Mhm.
I never studied chemistry or biology. I tried to avoid all the sciences when I was
Yeah.
in college. But what's the most interesting thing? Is there one interesting thing that you've learned about cannabis, even in the last few months or even in the last year, that you continue to find fascinating?
Yes. So when we originally developed the class, it was really the ECS and the nervous system, like how those two work hand in hand, and how that just because the ECS will help control neurotransmitters. But as the more I taught the class, the more I really started to dive into the immune system. And the immune system is super complex with a lot of moving parts and pieces. So just how the ECS works with the immune system was very fascinating, and all the different receptors that the cannabinoids hit and how it works on the immune system. So that kind of fits right in hand with COVID and how the immune system has been jeopardized, and how does CBD and THC really work to combat that virus. And the inflammation, that's the biggest thing, is all of our cannabinoids are anti-inflammatories. And so when you're talking about a disease that's inflaming your lungs and your bronchioles and all that, so if you can decrease that, that's huge. So that alone, I think cannabis would be very beneficial. And you just look at the research with asthma and respiratory illnesses and cannabis. So you can once again correlate the two.
It is amazing. Let me ask you about the students that you're getting in your courses. How many years has Cleveland School of Cannabis been around? A number.
2017. So yeah,
over the 3 years, and it's been pretty remarkable 3 years as far as the movement of the green wave through Washington and different states.
right.
What has the education, the base of education of your average student, has that improved over the 3-year period?
It's definitely evolved for sure. We're getting students that have better backgrounds in science. So, and that's always the difficulty in teaching, is finding that base level of where the student comes into. We've had students that are nurses and students that, their highest level of science was high school, biology or chemistry. And oftentimes they don't remember much. Even some of like our nurses that come through, they're like, yeah, I definitely took this, but I don't remember it as well. Like, differentiating different parts of the nervous system and that. So yeah, they're relearning it too. And we've even had a couple of doctors that have come through our comprehensive program, the MCC, that are always like, oh yeah, this is a great refresher, and just kind of, relearning, I guess, and they obviously move at a much faster pace. So you can kind of just touch over it, quick review, and then move on to the more complicated. So,
Are you finding doctors, MDs, are more receptive to learning about this plant now?
The ones that come and approach us at school, for sure. Mainstream, no, because they're not willing to accept it, or their hands are tied and they're just, but actually, we're in Cleveland. We have the Cleveland Clinic and University Hospital. But there is definitely some buzz. We've had people from those institutions coming to our school, and they're talking to the right people. So the minds are being open. The research at, the prominent hospitals and universities are starting. So there's definitely an interest. I think being Scheduled 1, they're still staying away from it because, it's just still a liability. And I know personally, I know doctors that have gone in and have gotten their hours in, and they're all ready to do recommending, but they're under, the University Hospital or Cleveland Clinic label. And once they hear that, they are told, they will not be covered for liability insurance. So that just ties their hands, and, they want to learn more. There are doctors out there, but they're just, bound by, the large hospitals.
One call by our new executive, can change that to the
Mhm.
Department of Justice. Steve D'Angelo taught me this last fall, that it is the scheduling of cannabis is an
Yes.
administrative thing more than anything else. So there doesn't have to be an act of Congress.
Mhm.
Sure, they can use it as part of a bill like the MORE Act that passed
Right,
the
right.
House. But realistically, if President-elect Joe Biden wants to, he can literally pick up the phone in his first 30 days or day in office, call the Department of Justice and say, let's deschedule that for now. And at least that would be a huge step in the right direction, because it would allow the doctors, at least, it would
huge.
allow the VA to
Mhm.
offer it to their veterans who are coming for help, whether it be
Oh,
PTSD or anxiety.
absolutely.
I mean, it's, to me, the fact that it's just a phone call, an administrative phone call, is unbelievable. Even if they move it down to Schedule 2,
Right,
that
right. Just
would be
get it off
symbolic.
Schedule 1. Just
Get
get
it
it
off
Schedule
Schedule 1. I agree 100% at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I mean, even at the state level, it happened with the hemp, like we had an issue in Ohio where hemp was just under cannabis. So we still were having issues with, CBD products. So they finally had to come in and change, and that was all by the governor. So yeah, it can happen quickly if it does happen. But like in other countries, I mean, you literally get cannabis in the hospital from the doctor and it's part of your treatment plan and insurance as well. So hopefully someday we'll be heading to that phase. It's really just with my son having a medical card, it's super expensive not having any supplemental, help to pay for the cannabis. It adds
Oh,
up month after month. So, but it's a necessity for him, and he has ulcerative colitis, so it's been huge help.
what are some of the diagnoses in Ohio that do qualify for a medical card, and what do you think might be missing from some of those diagnoses? Because I'm pretty sure anxiety, depression, chronic pain, Crohn's, epilepsy, seizures.
So
it goes down-
anxiety is not on Ohio's.
Anxiety is not on Ohio, and yet isn't that the one? Not the one, it's many, but it seems to be the one that gets the most action when doctors sit
Right.
down with patients and go through it.
Yes, for sure. So it was up in 2018 or 19, and it got declined. So we had autism, ADHD, anxiety, and then opioid addiction, and those all got declined.
Wait a second. Wait, hang on a second. Opioid addiction got declined
In Ohio.
in Ohio.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
that's just, to me, that's just nuts. I
It
can't
was-
tell you how many times I've interviewed people.
I
who said,
know it was.
"Hey."
So there's a couple reasons why, but mainly it was they didn't have, the research and the doctors, they didn't get enough MDs to really support it. So
Interesting.
I know. So it's coming all back up. Kakesia did became our 22nd, the wasting away syndrome. So you can get a medical card for that now. But that was the last one they just added. Yeah,
Huh.
I know.
And-
So I think they're going to try to get opioid addiction along with anxiety and autism, ADHD. They're going to try again. So they just got to get the doctors to get there. It's just that. And I think we have it now. So currently we have Ohio Medical Marijuana Physicians Association. That's really been taking off. UMPA, it's called. So Cleveland School of Cannabis is a member of that. And so they're really been doing a tremendous job and getting, bringing up those qualifying conditions to the next big push.
Now,
So
one of the things that I see on your bio is that you teach patient navigation. Can you explain what that means? I think I know, but just explain what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's teaching our students who want to be caregivers how to navigate, the dispensaries as well as the patient, and just trying to help. We have that disconnect between the doctor and the dispensaries. And so just to, really explain to a patient how it works, what dosage to take, what method of administration, and what would be the best for that certain individual, because every individual has, different needs. So they learn about dosing, they learn about different chemovars, they learn about terpenes, And we do a lot of role playing, which is kind of fun. You know, this patient has this, they're a novice, they've never used cannabis. They're fearful of THC and the psychoactive component. So we just go through all that. And a little bit of research, you know, just because it's so important if you're an advocate, like, hey, this is why we suggest you use cannabis and this is the research to support it. So we've been really trying to, you know, give our students, you know, ammunition to say, hey, here's this research, Google this, Google that, or give them, you know, go to PubMed and look at that, or neuroscience, you know, give them more, you know, just really concrete information. So I think that really helps put people at ease, especially people that have never used cannabis and are still scared of it, that propaganda really has sunk in because it was well done. So.
Well, it was well done, but you know, in the 70s, we protested everything, including any law that existed by the establishment. And that happened to be one of them, let's just say. And I grew up in the 60s and 70s. So
Gotcha.
That's one of the things that I always bring up to people and stuff. I wonder, when you are teaching the endocannabinoid system, and you're talking to these MDs, do they still look at it at all skeptically, or do they accept, I think it's Raphael Meshulam's discovery, that it actually exists?
Yes, there's no debate if the ECS exists. Good. Yeah, there's just, I mean, they can pinpoint the receptors. I mean, there's just way too much data. They have pictures of it. I mean, there's, you know, microscopes that, you know, have really laid it out. Just all the enzymes, how the endocannabinoids are made, what enzymes make them, what enzymes break them down, what do they regulate, you know, they can control all that. So it's the biochemical evidence is there. So there's no way to dispute that. It's just not being taught very thoroughly in the medical realm right now, unfortunately.
Right, and that's what we keep hearing about the MDs, the groups of MDs are like, well, if we didn't learn it in med school, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Huh?
Yeah, because it's like saying everything you learn in that, you know, 6 to 8 year period, that's all you're going to learn the rest of your life, which that doesn't make any sense, right? Because we know doctors have to do continuing education, so they're constantly learning new things, constantly new things are discovered all the time. And then the ECS, it is, in the 3 years that I started teaching it, so much more has been discovered. And we've had the fortune at the school we were working with Ben in-house, who is from Technon University from Israel. And it was on Dr. Meshulam's team and Dr. I'm forgetting the other doctor's name, but the Israel group that has done majority of the research. And it is just fascinating. They've, you know, identified over 34 receptors that work with the endocannabinoids and the cannabinoids plant-based, just what they activate and what they do in our body. So it's really being mapped out really well right now. So there's no debating and how it regulates, you know, the neurotransmitters and the calcium, potassium, all the channels and everything. Just the nitty gritties of how everything works in ourselves. So it's established. It's
amazing. I want to ask you about, and you're an educator, okay? I mean, I think that's pretty, you know, duh, right? So, as you know, we're in the middle of COVID. You've had to adapt your teaching skills from a in-person environment to either a hybrid environment or a totally remote environment. What are some of the observations you had about the actual learning process? Because I get it. I too have been a teacher. I've taught online, I've taught hybrid, I've taught in classes. And, you know, there's a difference when you're in a room with people and you can read their faces, but it's not the same thing when they can turn the video off too, and or they're in the remote classroom. Have you found that it's been tougher for a lot of people to learn that way?
Initially, definitely, because majority of our students had never really done any online class. They were always brick and mortar. So that was an adjustment. So we did spend a lot of time, working them through Zoom and just kind of walking them through breakout rooms. We did a lot with the breakout rooms on Zoom, because we do a lot of our classes are class projects or, working in groups. So
Right.
that was initially our biggest concern, like, how are we going to, create that community that we had at school on a Zoom platform. So once we really mastered the breakout rooms, it just, everything kind of fell back into place. So students were really starting to develop relationships with each other, which is one of the big assets of our school, is that networking. And even networking with the teachers is really important. So it was definitely a learning curve. Like the first couple of weeks, even for myself, like I teach a lot on the fly and quickly adjust when I need to. But if you can't read your, audience, it's hard to know if, this is failing miserably or this is doing great. So we did really try to make it a requirement for the students to have their cameras on so we can always, see them. So that was, we tried a soft approach at first, and then it was kind of like, no, that's not necessary. But we were changing platforms at the same time. We were going from one software program to another. So that switch forced it to go a lot faster, and everything in that was in a better alignment with being online. So it really worked out well. We did a lot of hard work behind the scenes, but now our school is really thriving from that COVID force of getting the online class up and running as well.
How many students have you got enrolled at this point at Cleveland School? Do you know?
Oh, I would have to I think we're up to like 350.
Okay, that's
yeah.
Cool.
So it's been hard at the brick and mortar because, we have to limit our class enrollment we have to cap them off at 15.
Right.
So that's really limited us, but, we do have the fortunate that they can just go online.
You also get involved with cultivation, and this is probably one of the most fascinating things for me because, chemistry pretty much goes over my head right away. But I'm amazed that growers now, we're going to be talking to a grower in about an hour on this show, can dictate the type of plant, the DNA and the makeup of the plant while growing. And I guess it all starts with the seeds.
Yes.
It's right. Am I wrong?
Yeah. Oh, you're so right. Yeah.
Okay, good. I never know anymore.
I'm sorry, Jay.
So no, it's all right. Go ahead. Tell me a little bit about how you dictate.
I mean, just think about genetics, like how we, children are born. It's just, you're just taking a mother and a father and combining it, and you can get, the blue eyes from the dad and, brown hair from the mother, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, same idea, what's being expressed, the phenotype or the traits that, we visually see. And then we have the genetics, that you don't always see, even though they're in the plant. So yeah, I mean, that's really, I think, one of the newer industries that's really going to pop, because now we know that cannabis, can help with, cancer. Well, what specific cannabinoids are doing the battling for cancer? Is it,
right,
CBC, cannabin, chromine, so if we can create plants that are high in those CBD contents, then you can really say this plant is for this illness. And it is so specific that it's just going to be, mind blowing, I think, just like you take certain pharmaceutical medicine for blood pressure, right? So that's the same idea. You're going to have the same, cultivar or chemovar for cancer. Yeah, you would take, and even as specific as breast cancer. So they're having great results with cancer research in cannabis, but something that works for prostate cancer is not working for breast cancer. So it just shows you that cancer is not all the same. Cancer is very unique. So the same chemovar, the same cannabis plant will not work with the different types of cancer. So that's surely fascinating. And that's part of the research that's been being done, is that you always have to have the same plant with the same cannabinoid percentages doing the same research. So it's having that standard in research is really what is taking off now. They really are getting more specialized in the research and method of administration. Sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but that's like just so important, is that we have a standard of research for cannabis.
Hey, don't worry about going off on tangents. I've been making my life doing that for the whole my entire life. People know that about me. Oh, there goes Jimmy again. Oh, there he goes. Just the nature of the beast.
It's so hard in this industry because they're all connected. They're so connected. I mean, you go down rabbit holes all the time. You'll be like, oh, this is working. It's just, they're all connected. They're all connected. But yeah, genetics is, they can do the genome of the plant, and then you can figure out what, I need this, and you splice it. You can do a lot. So it's just what they're doing with food genetics, right? So,
right. Well, the thing
idea.
that I was going to bring up is the fact that the U.S. House passed a research bill, or at least they passed a bill that will give opportunities for researchers to have access to the legally produced cannabis in each legal state, which is, a big step, because the only other cannabis they've been able to research is that University of Mississippi stuff that nobody even cares about anymore.
So, yeah, because in 2017 they put out a letter like, who else would like to grow cannabis for research, and then it sat for 3 years, and so now that list is back, and now you have private company, but I mean, it's been 3 years they've said that they were going to open it up for other cultivators to be part of the research, and it has not happened. I mean, so it's really frustrating, because as we know, what type of cannabis you're researching is going to really skew your results. And then once again, it goes back to the scheduled one, and how much. It's like, well, the research isn't there to make it not a Schedule 1, but the Schedule 1 is what's holding back the research. So it's like something's got to give, right?
Right. And yet the substance abuse community has had thousands of studies on cannabis looking for its addictive qualities, and they have really yet to come up with anything other than that use syndrome. And there's right. And I remember a doctor telling me, Dr. Uma Dhanabalan, who said, the substance abuse community has done over 29,000 studies of cannabis looking for something negative, and yet only 700 studies have been done on opioids. So it's like something's wrong with that picture.
Well,
for sure.
And the reason is because you won't get okay to do research on cannabis unless you're looking at it from a negative perspective, or because you can't do research for medical. Like you're not, right. So you have to word it. So you have to word it differently in the research to get that research approved, which hence why they're all on that, the negative side. But as you said, they found very little. For as much research that is out there, there is very little negative that's come from it. So that's a good thing, I guess, if you want to be optimistic.
Well, right. And I mean, again, I think we all recognize the injustices that have been part of this plant in our society. Certainly from a racial perspective, and definitely from the science perspective too, because it really has only been the substance abuse community that has done a lot of the research. And now it's time for the pro-cannabis community to start breaking down the flower and looking at the different cannabinoids, the CBD, CBN, CBG, CBDA. I mean, like I know what any of those are.
Yeah, I like it. Keep going. Yeah.
There's like, is there like 100?
Yeah, there's over 100. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And they're still learning what they all do.
Oh, right. That's yeah. So they're know they hit some receptors, but they don't know how or what's activating. Yeah, one of the biggest ones is the THCV, which is appetite suppressant. So obviously, that's going to be really important for our country with the obesity epidemic and diabetes. So, and,
Right.
just the diet pill alone, our Americans are always looking for, weight, not, to lose weight. So that's going to be the big one that's out there. Just throwing it out there.
No. And what's interesting, of course, and we go back to the stigma about weed, because, anybody who smokes weed, when as soon as they smoke weed, they're going to get the munchies.
Oh,
right.
Right.
And by the way, cancer patients have used it successfully to increase their appetite, because chemo kills their appetite, right?
Yeah, which is so important for a lot of the pharmaceutical medicines kill people's appetite. Well, if you're not eating, your body's not getting nutrients. It's not getting everything it needs to stay healthy. So, and it's really important to feed your endocannabinoid system we need omega-3s and 6s to make our own endocannabinoids. So we've got to keep our bodies healthy by eating. And if you're not eating, your health is just going to continue to decline. So that's like the really frustrating part too. I mean, there are purposes for stimulating an appetite. And, you can control the level of THC, and that's what stimulates the appetite. So just, but there's been research done on that, and it's a counterintuitive. It's not correlated. So if someone uses cannabis, doesn't mean they're all of a sudden going to have diabetes because they're eating too much. It's a falsehood for sure.
Yeah, well, it certainly has a lot of neurological work, and a lot of it affects the the endocannabinoid system.
It's a neuroprotectant. It protects our neurons. And
that's why you're the educator. That's why you're the educator. I'm the talk show host.
No, but I mean so if it once again, I always anti-inflammatory. So if your brain is inflamed, those neurons are not sending messages and they're just getting stuck. So once again, retrieving information to talk, to have our muscles work, it's all done via, our neurons sending messages. And so if our brain's inflamed, those messages get blocked. And so if we can protect our neurons from aging and getting damaged, we're going to be able to communicate better, have our physiology, our movement's going to be better. I mean, our overall health it's huge. I mean, as I age, I'm like, give me it as much as I can to protect my neurons. So my nervous system, so I don't get Alzheimer's, so I don't get that amyloid plaque buildup. And so I can, not get these wrinkles as well. So it's huge. It's a huge thing. Just protecting our nervous system and our neurons. I mean, that alone it says a lot.
Right. No, absolutely. And I'm with you on the as we age thing, and I look, I'm a medical patient, have been for years, and I'm going to be leaving my body to science whenever that happens, so that my body can be studied.
Nice.
Because for whatever reason, my metabolism's active. And even though my body's completely inflamed, because I swear I was an athlete once and I've had 4 surgeries in 22 years, but I'm still pretty active, and I still think, and every test I take, I come out normal, which surprises everybody who knows me. It just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, hey, Nicole Fenix, as always, I always enjoy talking to the faculty at Cleveland School of Cannabis. How do people find out about the Cleveland School of Cannabis?
So all you have to do is go to csceducation.com and you're in.
That's it. And if you can't, just ask Google, because Google knows everything.
Yes. Yeah. So we've added 2 new certification. We have industrial hemp now and a processing certification. So the state of Ohio, our hemp program is up and running. And so we've been really getting students to come in. A lot of hiccups still, obviously, with regulations with the hemp in Ohio, but it's definitely growing, and processing is becoming huge. I mean, that's the new money making industry with, edibles and just, all the different forms of getting cannabis in hemp products, as well as, medicinal. So
that's the decarboxylation process, isn't it?
It's part of it. Yes, definitely. First stage. Yep. You got to decarboxylate and then you process. Yeah. So I love it. That's a good word, Jimmy. It suits you.
I've said it a few 100 million times now. That's for sure. Hey, Nicole, thank you so much again for joining us. Have a wonderful holiday season to you and everybody at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. Please pass it on. And again, look forward to continuing our relationship in the new year.
Oh, great. Thanks, Jimmy. I appreciate it. Enjoyed myself.
All
Have
right,
a good one.
You too.
Stay
Take care
safe.
now. Yep,
Stay
thank
safe.
you. Oh, that's Nicole Fenix from the Cleveland School of Cannabis. We are Cannabis Chat. I am Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and we're going to spin around a little bit here, come back to Massachusetts, and talk to a couple of dispensary owners. It's a challenge to run a weed dispensary, and we'll find out about those challenges after this break. Don't go away. We continue with more of Cannabis Chat after this. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, as a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, "Hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what?" I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports and talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs, that's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old, the standard bearer in the market, is with has a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of Experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the
Hey.
Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. We call this Wednesday show Professor Weed Wednesdays, and we just talked to the Director of Education at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. But now we're going to turn our attention back here to the Massachusetts area to two guys who are involved with a dispensary in Amesbury and Haverhill, which I think I explained at the beginning of the broadcast, that is close to the New Hampshire border for those of you who aren't from the Massachusetts area. So Scott Winters and Rob DiFazio join us from the CNA Dispensary, Amesbury and Haverhill area. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Well, no. You got to give Scott all the credit in the world here, Rob, because he's the one who reached out to me, and I'm just a sucker for a long conversation with a guy like that. So.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah,
it worked out great. So I think I'll start with, I'm going to start with Scott, if that's okay. All right. And then we'll get back to the CEO of the whole thing. But Scott, tell me a little bit about how challenging has it been to be operating a dispensary during COVID, and you're not your first year, isn't it?
This is our first. Well, yeah. It is challenging. I think life in general is challenging. So I think, trying to work everything, including a business and life and a work life. It's a very different year. It's almost undescribably different. I think parts of it worked in our favor because we were building the business, so we could kind of keep moving while everything else had kind of quieted down a little bit. But now that we're open, it is definitely challenging to for people all across, for the individual families, economy, everybody's economy. So it's a tough year.
And Rob, is it adult use or medical or both? What do you got?
It's adult use.
Adult use. Yeah. So I got to ask, as a business guy, are your projections equal to what you expected when you first went in? I know that, obviously with COVID, everything's taken a bit of a hit, but around the world and around the country, there's been a bit of a lift. I want to know, has it lived up to the financial projections that perhaps you had when you first got your license and you got the commence operations? Has it worked out for you?
So if you really look at the whole process as a whole, when we got involved about 2.5 years ago, it wasn't quite clear as to how long the process would take. And it literally took us about 2 years to get to the point where we could actually open the doors last month. So we've only been open for about a month.
Okay.
And we opened up the week before Thanksgiving. And actually yesterday was, a month of operations. Can I tell you they're where we thought they would be? No, they're definitely not. Obviously, just because of a lot of different things, you've got, you're limited in where you can market. You've got COVID going on. There's a lot of restrictions when we first opened because they were afraid of traffic concerns 2 years ago when they gave us our special permit, whereas they put us on appointment only and things of that nature. So there's a ramp up period to get to where we think we're going to be. And I fully expect that, with my team that we have in place that, we're trying to create that experience more so than to turn product. We're developing a brand that we want people to be able to recognize and not only know for cannabis, but for all the other things that we do. From helping, the disabled to helping the like tonight, I got my yellow vest on because I'm actually going to go do our Snow Angels program through our blizzard that we're about to have, where we go and shovel out all the elderly and disabled in Amesbury and the North Shore, basically. So, there's a lot of good, I think, that we can do with this industry. And I think that's the part of it that really kind of excites us. I always tell Scott, you asked him how we handled COVID and all that stuff, and I used to use this phrase all the time. We work smarter, not harder, and the key thing is, you got to kick in that Boston accent, right? In some cases, it sounds even better when it's a Maine accent, but,
oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's right. I get that down too.
Yeah. Can't get there from here.
Can't get there from here. Yes, sir.
So I'm the oddball from Buffalo, New York here. So I'm not quite sure what to say.
You don't have to say anything. You have to deal with lake effects your whole life. It follows you everywhere. I can't believe it. I'm shocked to hear that there's actually a snowstorm coming. I haven't heard anything about it over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Hey, one of the things that I'm very intrigued about, and Scott talked about it when we first talked. You're veteran owned. You're a veteran. You went a Navy guy, aren't you?
Yeah, I was in the Navy for a little over 5 years. I was in the nuclear power program in the Navy. I joined the Navy to see the world, and they sent me to Orlando, Florida for boot camp in January and February, which was absolute godsend. Beautiful weather. And then they sent me to Ballston Spa, New York, which is up by Saratoga Springs. My total sea time was about 40 minutes. I got a 20-minute tour of my buddy's submarine down in Groton, Connecticut. And then my father-in-law bet me I couldn't get him on a U.S. frigate in Ireland. He's from Ireland. I was over there one Christmas and a frigate pulled in. He's like, "Oh, that's a big U.S. boat. I bet you can't get me on there." And sure enough, I walked right up to the gangplank. I said, "Command Master Chief, my father-in-law bet me I couldn't get him on this boat." And yep, sure enough, he's like, "Come on, get him over here. We're going to give him a full tour." So, no, I was been very fortunate. I got picked up as an instructor, so I got to teach how to operate a nuclear power plant. So it was a lot of fun in that aspect.
It's a lot of responsibility too, I think, right?
Yeah, especially when you're about 24 years old and you could kill everybody within a 50 square mile radius if you screwed up. But yeah, that's a pretty good size responsibility.
Don't screw up.
Yeah, that was the rule.
That's right.
It's kind of hard though with all the safety precautions they have in place. So and the rigorous training, So
obviously, you guys know education drives the bus. Science, research, and education has been driving the bus in the cannabis industry now for a number of years. We've seen the wave go through Massachusetts with Question 4 years ago. Now you're open for business, and now the real work begins because now you're in business and you have to make sales. How are you reaching out to your community? And I guess, Scott, this is your question. Besides making snow angels, how are you reaching out to your community and enlightening them about the benefits of this plan?
So I've been speaking publicly about the benefits of this plan, mainly due to personal experience. I treat for mental health. And so here in Amesbury, I took on the job of being the pot guy. And I say that with admiration. It just I didn't think I'd ever be in that space. And I started talking at the podium in City Hall with the police chief, with the mayor, with our council. And that started to get around to where people in the city started coming to me. And I get emails and private messages all the time about, cannabis related topics, whether that's, different types, whether that's a concentrate or a flower, or it just ranges the gamut. So I've garnered a lot of trust in Amesbury, which is it's a responsibility. And I try not to use it as a business practice as much as an educational practice and talking to people freely. A lot of them are growing their own. A lot of them won't come into a dispensary anytime soon. But I still hold that responsibility pretty dear. I was also a government official. Our mayor at the time appointed me to the city's first and the state's first solely cannabis focused government committee to just kind of figure out the ins and outs, zoning and where not to zone. And so I have a kind of a 3 different hats. I started as an advocate. I went into as a community representative. So you have to think of the community first and then cannabis, just after that. And now being in the industry. So I hope still, they reach out a lot, and I take that responsibility very seriously still.
If you think about it, Jimmy, the big thing from the education standpoint is people don't know what they don't know. Right. And I've heard that phrase all the time through business. You figure it out by doing it in some cases. But, cannabis has helped a lot of different people in my life. And that's kind of how I learned was, my business partner. I own a deli up in Brunswick, Maine, with one of my best friends, a true Mainer, and he has epilepsy, and he has to take cannabis to control his seizures and things of that nature. My niece in Ireland, again, she has epilepsy. She can't take it because it's not legal over there, but they're giving her other drugs to try and treat her, and it's not working. So, we're trying to get her to come over here and talk to some of the doctors over here to see if there's something that they can do to help her with that aspect. My mom has onset of early Parkinson's disease. I have her on a CBD and THC 1-to-1 ratio, and it's slowing down the shakes on her hands. So it's actually having an impact that I can visibly see, and it's helping treat close people to my family. So once you see things like that, my whole life I've been one to try and figure things out as we go, and I do that by just consuming knowledge. I learned how to operate a nuclear power plant well enough to turn around and teach somebody in a year and a half. Normally takes people 4 years of college and 2 years of operations just to get to the point where they let them stand alone. But the way the Navy program taught you how to consume knowledge, and push what I call the I believe button. You keep believing it until you get in front of it and actually see it happening, and then everything kind of falls into place from there. So when everybody always asks us, Scott's there when we do our community outreach meetings, how do you prevent kids from, getting into cannabis? And then I tell them it's knowledge. You have to train, you have to teach them, you have to let them know the adverse effects and why it's not good for kids and things of that nature. So to me, in my household, I've got a 15-year-old that lives, that he's a sophomore in high school, and I keep telling him, like, you can't do this, it's illegal. This is why it's not good for young kids. And we lay it out in front of them, just from a standpoint of, just so he has enough knowledge to make good decisions, right? So I'm not trying to force him to do stuff, but I'm giving him the knowledge so that when he makes the decision, it's a good decision.
Is it, let me tell you, as a parent, first of all, the toughest job you'll ever have, that. Okay? And teenagers, ridiculous, right? So when you talk to your teenagers about this product, are you also talking to them about the other adult use products that are out there, including alcohol, caffeine, cigarettes? There's a million. Vaping.
Energy drinks is a big thing.
Energy drinks. I mean, so I'm guessing it's now the whole gambit, right? This is what the difference is between your son at 15 and me at 15. To me at 15, it was a act of civil disobedience. It was against the law, but the kids knew more about it than the adults did. Now there are opportunities for the adults to educate themselves and share that education with their children in talks. And I'm interested to hear how that went in your family, if you're willing to talk about it.
It was great. I mean, so there's I've got 3 kids. One's 24, one's 23, and then a 15-year-old. And believe it or not, the 15-year-old was the only planned one. The other 2 were oops, and oh my goodness, we got another one.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, but it's funny because my oldest son, he's the middle child, he's 23. He's actually the one who got me into this industry. He said to me, Dad, before I got into cannabis, I was into data centers. I got out of the military right around the Y2K, and I got into data centers, and I went around the globe building data centers, for large companies, a lot of the social media guys and banks and things of that nature, to where it took me to Canada, it took me to, to Dublin, to Amsterdam, Germany, Mexico. I've been all over the place. I told you I joined the Navy to see the world. I went to 2 places, got out of the Navy and went into the data center industry. And I think I've hit all but maybe 9 states so far, and then about 7 different countries. But that conversation with my youngest son was more or less along the lines of, I'm going into this business. You need to know about this because people are going to ask you questions. And, my wife's from Ireland. So growing up in our household, kids, my kids, we didn't hide alcohol from them. We were okay if they wanted to have a drink, they can have it. Once they turned 18 and we went home to Ireland to see her family, it was, hey, you're 18, you can drink, you can do what you want. You come back to the States, but you gotta arm them with that knowledge, so that when you have that conversation, it's not you chastising your child. It's a conversation with your child, to where they ask you the questions, and it wasn't me telling him, it was me asking a question along the lines of, how do you think this affects your body? And get their input. And then we'd come back with, okay, because your mind's still developing, this is really the true aspects or impacts to somebody under the age, of 20, 21 years old, and what it will do to affect you in your development process. So just kind of giving them that knowledge and making that conversation be more of a friendly conversation and not adversarial, kind of, where you're, because 95% of the time, the first time you have that conversation, like when I had that conversation with my parents, it's because they caught me and they were yelling at me.
Right.
And if you have that conversation before anything happens, then they know where they're at, and they kind of know, kids are going to be kids. They're going to try everything. They're going to do everything, it's just one of those things that, you'd learn. Like, I'll be honest with you, my 24-year-old, she turned out awesome, but I had no idea what I was doing. Same thing with my 23-year-old. They turned out, thank God, my wife's as good as she is, because they turned out to be great kids. My 15-year-old, I've learned from the other two, so I'm actually think I might be doing a better job, but I mean, he might disagree.
Should we get him on the phone and ask him? No, I'm only kidding. Let me ask you a question. You mentioned 18 and 21 being the adult use age. When I was growing up in the 70s, the drinking age was 18.
Yep.
You mentioned in Ireland, 18. Europe has less alcoholics than the United States. I'm just wondering, what is your feeling about that age? And should it be, if you're old enough to go in the Navy at 18, shouldn't you be allowed to drink or choose whether or not you want to smoke too? What do you think?
The big thing is when you turn 18, it's the big event. You're no longer a child. You're considered an adult in everybody's eyes, and you get treated as such, with the exception of alcohol and, now cigarettes in Massachusetts, you have to be 21, and cannabis. But yet you can go and fight and die for your country, but you're not smart enough to make a decision to run your own life in those three aspects. And to me, I can understand why some people are cautious about that, because they're not good parents, and to me, if you are engaged in a good parent with your child, they're going to make good decisions. When my son goes out, I tell him, don't get in trouble. I don't say that. I said, you know what, Shay, you go out, just make good decisions tonight, because whatever you do, I'm there for you, even if you make a bad one. I said, the worst thing you can do in my household is lie to me. That's when I get mad. If you tell me the truth, you screwed up and this is what you did, I'm going to help you every which way I can. And Mike, that's the mantra within our household, that you can't have those open conversations if they're afraid they're going to get yelled at or get punished because of it. So it's an approach. It might be different than other people, but that's what I see in Ireland, even for that matter. With my nephews that are over there, they're responsible drinkers. They understand the concepts. Yes. Do they, go out and have a few too many? Yeah, sure. Every once in a while, but they choose to do that, and they're in a safe environment when they do that. So, it's all about giving them the right education, the right information, so that they can make a good decision, and they know they're making a good decision, because they know the impacts of going the other directions and doing the other things.
So as a
I'm sure Scott was the perfect child.
What's that?
I was not. I was on my own at 15, so I learned everything the hard way. Back to the other, I think being consistent with your methodologies is important. So you said the 18 and 21, you're old enough to fight for your country. You're old enough to take on that type of responsibility, but you're not you're not old enough to have a beer or have a toke. I'm not sure which way that should go, but I think there should be some consistency there. I think if you're worried about closed head traumas or that type of mental capacities and mental growth, I think you need to be consistent in the conversation.
Right.
So
are you guys running any educational events at the dispensary? Of course you can't, because you can't have more than 10 people in a room anymore.
So we do all of our blogs that we do are our biggest part of our education, and that's internally and then out to the public. We have places in our dispensary that you can sit. We can pull folks out of line if necessary, and have a nice 6 feet apart, just socially distanced. It's a good amount of space where we can sit and we can share our education with that end user. We also do the same thing with blogs. So all of the blogs that we write are written in-house. And what happens that way is, when you write something about the ensemble effect or terpenes,
the entourage effect.
I was taught to say it the other way, because so entourage leads people to believe that THC is the superstar and all the other compounds are following it, where the ensemble effect alludes to they all work together symbiotically. It's potato.
He's a musician, so he likes the ensemble. He needs a drummer at
that. and I'm a drummer that likes to feel just as important as everybody else. So, we use those blogs internally as education, and then of course those go out to the public and can educate on that end. It is tough. We're going to do some video work coming up on different topics, whether that's products that we carry, or methods if you're consuming flour, is it maybe a better choice to vaporize that flour for health benefits as well as efficiency? You get 40% more of your compounds back when you don't hit it with a lighter, right? And so educating the public on topics like that, it'll make their eighth or quarter go 40% longer that way, or they'll get 40% more out of their product. And I think as a business, people will appreciate that kind of knowledge, and as a consumer base, we'll constantly be educating the consumer base, which will it'll step us up. It'll take the whole industry up. I think I was talking to somebody today about federal legalization, and that was the one thing that I was super excited about, was that you're going to have more studies, and that we as an industry are going to really learn we can hone this craft, and we've done a pretty good job, I think. And I shouldn't say we, but the industry itself has done a really good job within the last 5 years of really expanding the knowledge base. We've gone from, flour and maybe a shatter to, pressed rosins and fresh frozens and full spectrum extracts on the concentrate and full spectrum flour on the vaporizer. And I think as a community as a whole, that education is huge. For somebody that lives in a condo, simple example, right? Somebody that lives in a condo, they might be leery of the smell of cannabis, not knowing that, that there's so many other ways of ingesting now. Or if, your liver doesn't function, I shouldn't say it doesn't function properly. If you don't produce enough of the right enzymes, right, it's not that those edibles are bad. It's so that your stomach will never be able to really take an edible properly. And you need to find a different way to consume. And I think us in the industry, that's our job, to kind of sit folks down and to have that conversation, on a really equal basis. It's not really about a sale. It's really just about making, because we're adult use. We're
right.
I'm not saying we're not medicinal, because the two overlap huge.
There's no difference between the adult use product and the medical product.
No,
other than the tax that you get charged by the state.
Yeah,
that's really the only
little 20% bump thing. Yeah,
get that little bit.
23.
You don't have a vertical. You're not growing it too, are you?
Yeah, we are. We will be. We have a cultivation site.
Great. Awesome. Well, that's the way you control it and everything. And guys, I got to tell you, the 30 minutes just flew. It's like I ran into a couple of old friends, which I really enjoyed. But we're gonna have to say, I didn't even get a chance to ask you about the host security agreements and the delivery licenses, which are all the stuff that's going on. But
we'll have to come back and do this again.
Yes, you will. And more importantly, when it comes time to do your videos, I know who you can call. Anyway, hey, Scott Winters and Rob DiFazio, thank you. Best of luck. Where's CNA Dispensary? What's the location? How people can find you? Come on, Scott.
Our Haverhill location is 558 River Street in Haverhill, and our Amesbury location at the first of the year will be 77 Macy Street, Amesbury, Massachusetts, and you can find us at cnastores.com.
CNAstores.com. That's where you find it. All right, guys. Hey, thank you so much for joining us. And of course,
thank you.
Anytime you want to talk sports, Rob, I'm available. Okay.
All right.
I'm from Buffalo. I'm not talking about sports.
I think the Buffalo Bills have the best team in the AFC. All right. Even Kansas City. I can't wait to see that AFC championship game. And just remember, I just said Buffalo and Kansas City in the AFC championship game. In the meantime, we have another half hour to go on Cannabis Chat. We have another great guest coming in. Don't go away. We just have to take a little bit of a timeout, but we'll come back in just a few minutes. Thanks for watching. We'll be back.
Getting into accounting actually started when I was younger. It's a funny story. My grandparents used to watch us every summer, me and my sister. And my grandfather owned stock in the company that he worked for, the electric company they had worked for forever. And he retired, he would check that stock price every day. So it'd be something fun that I would do with them. We'd look at the newspaper, I'd check the stock price with them. And I think that's where my love of numbers came in. And it turns out that I didn't even realize this when I picked accounting as my major. My other grandfather, my father's father, was an accountant as well. He was much older when I knew him, so I didn't realize he was an accountant, but I guess it kind of runs in the family.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi,
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security Safe, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the big finish, the big last 30 minutes of Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. We call it Professor Weed Wednesdays. I'm Jimmy Young here in the Pro Cannabis Media Studios just outside of Boston, Massachusetts. And we are joined now by someone who's in Colorado. A little bit different out there in Colorado. His name's Jordan Stauder. And it says here that you are a Commercial Cultivation Advisor at GrowRay Lighting Technologies. Is that accurate, Jordan?
That's right. Yeah. Or you could kind of even simplify that down to be a commercial cannabis advisor. So everything from top to bottom when it comes to, the startup of one of these operations all the way to finish. So kind of from the foundation to everything above that. And that includes labs too. I have a pretty extensive history in laboratory extraction, as well as cultivation too. So I'm always happy to talk to any cultivator. Like I run into them all the time about anything that's going on in their grows. Everything, if it involves lighting, great. I'm right up that alley. But everything else I've had experience with. So.
How many years have you been in Colorado in the cannabis space?
Well, I've been in Colorado since 2009. I've been in cannabis since 2014, fresh out of college. Yeah. So, yeah. And, I'm that classic story, man. I'm the guy who got a job as a bud tender, right? Moved up from a bud tender position to assistant manager position. Then next thing you know, I was managing 4 different stores. And then past that, moved into a general manager job with a pretty large incorporation here in Colorado that ran 2 cultivation licenses and 2 lab licenses here in Boulder. Wow. So did that until 2019.
So you absolutely do know every part of the business. It's interesting. You mentioned being a manager of a dispensary. I just had a guy on with his CEO, a CEO and a COO of a new dispensary, adult use dispensary in Massachusetts. They just opened about a month ago, and they're opening up their second location in January. And of course, needless to say, Jordan, you didn't have a lot of experience with COVID during your career as a assistant manager or a bud tender in Colorado. But can you imagine opening a dispensary in this era? That's a challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a challenge in and of itself, but it's also a challenge whenever you consider the regulations that you're under, for specific places. Here in Colorado, when COVID hit, we had 0 delivery licenses. Nobody could go out and deliver. So, now that COVID hit, we have, I believe, 6 delivery licenses out at the moment on the medical side. So.
And they're
so that's actually a COVID change, totally.
Right. And well, look, in Massachusetts, they shut down adult use rec in Massachusetts and allowed the medical dispensaries to be essential. But the governor, who is not a big fan, I call him someone who deals with the necessary evil weed, and he wants to make sure that every regulation, every compliance issue is in place, because he wants this industry to grow extremely slowly. And and he's gotten his
I hear that. I hear that totally. Now compliance, when it comes to these sorts of things, from an operator's perspective, compliance is absolute king. You know what I mean? So following that law from from where we are, is what you got to do. But man, if they're kind of, dragging feet on actually putting out the regulations that people are supposed to follow, then, what he's honestly doing is shooting himself in the own foot. The quicker you can get these things going, the quicker you can kind of get some of this tax revenue coming in, and the quicker you can address things like COVID and things that spring up like this.
Yeah, he's got a little issue with the tax revenue that has been delivered so far, especially in the city of Boston. They put it into a substance abuse area, and it's like, guys, it's like, there's so many people that have been hurt the most by the war on drugs, this failed war on drugs.
Totally.
They need access to capital. So let's put it in an abuse. Let's not talk politics. All right, let's go back to weed. But I want to talk about delivery licenses, because I think they actually have done it right here in Massachusetts, finally giving an opportunity for the social equity applicants to have first crack at the licenses, these delivery licenses, for the next 3 years. And I know in Colorado, even though you've had a mature market, you just explained, they just introduced delivery in Colorado.
Yeah, they just did. And, for Colorado, I would have loved to see them go that route, right? The route of the Illinois considerations for social equity for licensure, and the same thing out there in Massachusetts. It was kind of a scramble because there was no plan in place to have delivery instituted from dispensary to customer, right? So they were scrambling and just kind of gave it to the big guys. You know what I mean? The big guys that kind of came forward first and said they could handle it. So
it makes it easy on their decisions to deal with the MSOs. Look, human nature. We want our lives to be as easy as possible, because we know the challenges are are difficult everywhere, no matter where they are. But in Colorado, you've got, I think, is that $1 billion in tax revenue that has been generated over 10 years? Did I read that right?
Yeah, totally. And we're just over $1 billion. And that makes a difference, obviously, right?
Well,
I mean,
look,
good roads,
every other good roads and good schools, right? Good roads and good schools. Pretty good, right?
Good roads, good schools, and actually they take a chunk of that. And this was pre-COVID, because I think things got moved around. But they took a chunk of it into trying to keep kids get educated on marijuana. So
good.
That's huge. That's great. You know what I mean? Because the responsible use of this plant and cannabinoids and everything derived from them is what's going to, legitimize it going forward on a national scale. So.
Right. And if I remember correctly, there's also a study both in Washington State and in Colorado, two very legal states that have been around, I believe, for 10 years now. Teen weed use has gone down in these.
Gone down. Correct. Yeah, something that nobody would have predicted beforehand. Correct.
No, in fact, it's the first.
It was one of the
go-to arguments by the prohibitionists, right?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Everybody thinks that it's going to be open to all, but no, it's that educational aspect of things. It goes a long way. It really does. So
sure it does.
I'm glad they include that.
Absolutely, and again, I'm paying attention to the Colorado market for sure. Let's talk about cultivation and the challenges. Every state has different regulations about the amount of the different pesticides that are tested. Right? Now, I talked to a few testing labs and growers here in Massachusetts, and there's more pesticides tested for in Massachusetts than I believe any other state. That being said, as someone who understands cultivation, are there ways around that, or do you really have to stick with what they're looking for? Do it the right way as opposed to cutting corners?
No, there are absolute ways around it, and it's wrapped up under a subject around growing called integrative pest management, right? And that includes pathogens as well, which is just your molds and everything else that your pesticides would be attacking. Right. So things that you can institute in your growing environment, such as keeping your humidity levels in check, airflow within the room to a high degree. Defoliating plants and clearing out some of the fan leaf vegetation. Those things can all be done to kind of increase airflow into the plant and mitigate some of the pathogen problems within the grow. And then of course, it's just another element of that is plant health and vigor. You know what I mean? Healthier plant is going to be 10 times better at repelling or resisting any kind of infestation like that than one that's weak and under stress. So those are the things that, in my grow, I would lean on 100% in order to keep pesticides out of my grow. And to be honest with you, for the better part of the time that I managed Rocky Mountain Green, which is the name of that company in Colorado, we didn't use pesticides. We never had to. We never tested positive for a pesticide, we didn't have them even in our facility when Department of Agriculture would come through and check them out. So there's ways that you can grow and control your environment and your methodologies within your cultivation and processes and everything, where you can basically knock out all of your pesticide needs. It's not entirely essential, in other words. There's even other foliar sprays that are out there that kind of act as the same thing in a secondary type of effect, right? So like some sort of spray that would help in terpene enhancement, might help in powdery mildew, right? So things like that.
Are the what's the ratio? You may or may not know this. Are there outdoor grows in Colorado?
There are, yeah.
Percentage indoor versus outdoor, 50-50, 75 indoor?
10% outdoor, I would say.
It's kind because you've got the extremes of weather.
True, and I'm including greenhouse and indoor, right? Obviously.
Okay.
But yeah, no extremes in weather, and we normally get one good crop in. For the past 2 years, we've gotten a pretty early snow. You know what I mean? So while those outdoor growers, I mean, they're taking full advantage of the free light and everything like that. You're susceptible to Mother Nature and how she wants to throw it at you. You
right.
know what I mean?
We're getting thrown at 18 inches over the next 36 hours in the Boston area. So
go get your shovels and salt and all that, man. But yeah, I imagine
all-wheel drive.
All-wheel drive cars. Amen.
Let me ask you about sustainability in the cannabis industry. I've talked to a few people in Colorado about this in California about this as well. Are there any solar only dispensaries in Colorado? Solar powered?
No, there are not, to my knowledge. There's
one in Massachusetts. There's one out of 45 or whatever. But gotcha. I wonder, as an industry that is all about the plant, where that might play. Could they build in incentives? Certain states have incentives. I know Massachusetts does. But to me, it seems like the electric cost, you'd want to try and limit it and take as much power as you possibly can from the sun. But I'm fascinated to find out that there isn't anything in Colorado like that.
Yeah, and it's tough because if you have, generally speaking, if you have an indoor grow with a footprint that is what it is. If you were to cover that roof with solar panels, then it's not going to come close to running the lights, running the power needed for just the lights inside of that grow house, not to mention the HVAC and everything else that happens there. So it would have to be off site. And there's a couple different ways that you can do it. There's a couple different programs as well. Now, one thing that I would say is on the forefront of kind of this type of movement is here in Boulder County. And I chair this committee with Boulder County. It's called the Energy Impact Offset Fund Steering Committee. And our aim is to basically lower the carbon footprint of grows within our jurisdiction. Right. So one of the ways that we found to do that was able to basically buy into a significant solar farm and allocate that energy to those grows, right? In order to lower fees and things like that. So, there's different jurisdictions trying things like that because, when you legalize cannabis, you're legalizing the use of a lot of energy. You know what I mean? And no utility these days is going to want to throw up another power plant. What they would much rather do is have you save that energy right off the bat, right? Up front. They would have you save it. So, that's why we see lighting power densities coming down the pipe with different jurisdictions, different states. I believe Massachusetts has its own, right? Yeah. And that basically mandates the use of efficient lighting fixtures, such as LEDs, like we have at GrowRay. And then past that, it's all of the associated HVAC, right? LEDs are going to put out about, 30% less or 40% less heat than a traditional high pressure sodium light. And therefore you do not need as much HVAC to offset that. So it's really looking at all of these systems in a kind of a whole systems approach, everything working with each other instead of things working against each other. However, what I would say in terms of renewables is that there are several companies here in Colorado that are kind of coupling different renewable sources together, such as buying into wind farms, buying into solar farms, buying into solar farm co-ops, and things like that. But as of now, past the rebates that you would see for energy improvements through the utility around us, it's lightly incentivized, I should say. It should be incentivized more, like some other states, for sure.
Well, it just makes sense for the industry in so many ways. Let's talk about GrowRay Lighting Technologies. What differentiates your grow lights from others?
Man, if I was to put it into one simple thing, it is that we have created our light for cannabis on cannabis, and nobody else has been able to do this. So GrowRay originally started out as a lighting company. We're getting into LEDs and doing a lot of research like that. We partnered up with an MSO named Nobo Inc. And they operate here in Colorado and Michigan, and soon to be Illinois, hopefully. But Nobo started testing out our lights and basically liked them so much that they bought the company. So from there on forward, seriously. But from there on forward, we have had a quasi in-house R&D facility where we have worked with different PhDs in photobiology and guys that are a lot smarter than me. That's just the fundamental guy on the ground, right? To optimize the spectrum that we have with GrowRay for cannabis, and it's the first time it's ever been done. When I say it's the first time it's ever been done, that puts all other lights into a category of, hey, this looks like it's going to work, so let's throw it at some people. You know what I mean? We definitely treated ourselves as guinea pigs with that. But, we got a couple of pretty significant pieces of IP around the greenhouse solution for LED lighting that are absolutely pivotal. So yeah, GrowRay is on the cutting edge. It's brand new stuff. I was an old HPS and ceramic metal halide grower and stuff like that going back years. And if I was talking to you about this now 3 years ago, I'd be talking something completely different. But I've seen it, and we've broken the glass ceiling finally. On not only production in terms of weight, but on potencies and cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids, all across the board. So yeah, it really is cutting edge stuff.
I love when you said a lot smarter than guys like me. Now, I was a sportscaster, okay? I do not pretend to be a smart guy, okay? I get it, all right? But I've never talked to so many intelligent PhDs, doctors, scientists, botanists. I mean, it's in this industry is filled with brilliant people, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah. And not only that, but I mean, if you start getting into the element of testing, right? Or let's just stay with the plant. So if you stay with the plant, let's stay with the plant for a moment here. There's companies out there that are figuring out how to inhibit stress within these plants in order to just make all of the function of the plant better. But not only that, to kind of buffer against some of the downfalls of growing commercially on a large scale where you can't spot everything. and with some labor issues where, you know, frankly, there's a lack of knowledgeable cannabis growers out there to fill these jobs. So companies like the company I refer to is YP Organics, and it's on the cutting edge stuff. But, you know, that's one thing that helps out cultivation that nobody else has heard about. On the lab side of things as well, I mean, you have chemists, you have biochemists, all those guys that are also smarter than me, that are figuring out how to synthesize different concentrates and figuring out how to isolate your THC-8s and Delta 8s, and it's just incredible stuff, man. So I mean, while we can all kind of harp back on a lack of openness to research nationally for this whole thing, rest assured that there's more studies that have been done on cannabis than there have been done on like aspirin and things like that. Right. So we understand that plant a whole lot better than some of these pharmaceuticals that are out there.
Right. But most of those studies have been done by the substance abuse community, looking for reasons not to use it. And to me, a lot of those studies are jaded. That's why when the House passed their research bill last week, I was actually pretty excited for the people I've talked to, because, you know, they're discovering new cannabinoids every day. And then they want to isolate the cannabinoid to figure out, okay, what's this CBG stuff, right? Everybody knows about CBD, but this CBG or CBN really has some interesting qualities to it. And I mean, we're talking about a molecule inside the bud of a plant, right?
You are, yeah. And I mean, it goes farther than that. There's over, I think at this point, 110 or 120 identified cannabinoids.
Well, we're going to check the cannabinoid scoreboard right now, and it's about 110. I think you're right.
There it is. But I mean, you know, it goes even farther than that. You have some people out there that are synthesizing individual cannabinoids by means of bacteria and things like that, so that you are producing just that cannabinoid, as opposed to producing a bud that has a proportion of that cannabinoid, where it's much harder to kind of split those things up. Much easier just to make them individually, right? So
what are the laws for home grow in Colorado?
You can grow. Anybody 21 and over can have, I believe it's 6 plants now, 3 in veg, 3 in flower.
Right. So that's the same thing in Massachusetts. It's 6 plants per adult in a 2-person dwelling, get you 12 plants. And that's a lot of weed if you grow it at home, right?
It is. And that's the thing, like, depending on the amount of room you have, when you're limited by plants, you can have some large plants. You know what I mean?
What's the largest plant you've ever seen?
Well, the largest plant I've ever seen personally is the largest plant I've ever grown. And, you know, we do have, it's legal to grow here where you live and everything like that. So, all right. But it was
6 feet, 8 feet.
No, it was about 8.5 feet. But I mean, it was about 6 feet wide is the thing.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I never watered it once. I placed it next to a canal and it just soaked it up all summer long. So, it turned out to be a hassle is what it turned out to be.
Well, it's not a difficult.
It's a good problem to have, I guess.
I was going to say, right. So let me ask you about the water. So when I talked to, you know, Maine is also a new state that has an adult use program. And I've talked to growers up there, and they say the key component and the difference maker in Maine is the purity of the water that's going into the plant. Is that hogwash, or does that make sense to you?
No, there's efficacy to that. Now, with all the new states coming on that are kind of getting into metals testing and testing for metals in the plant and things like that, what you'll find is that a lot of times those metals will be present in your water. You know what I mean? And you have to filter that stuff out if it is. So, and if it's present in the water, then, you know, things that become bioavailable to the plant, such as arsenic, right, would become possibly into the bud that would be consumed by the public. So kind of, yeah, it starts at the beginning. It's the front of the line thing. As I always tell people that are looking to get into cannabis, number one, I tell them it's not a glamour job. So don't just think you're going to be, stoned all the time in your job. But number two, it's a factory environment, man. It's a assembly line type mentality. You know what I mean? From seed to sale. So,
right.
So yeah.
And you've been there. You understand the seed to sale process. So if people want to get to you and pick your brain as a consultant, how do they find you, Jordan?
Hit me up on email is the best. Jordan at Stauderfish, STAUDERFISH.com. Jordan at GrowRay.com is good too. But yeah, at Stauderfish everywhere else.
Stauderfish everywhere else. Well, hey, Jordan, thank you so much for joining us, enlightening us. I love chatting with people from mature markets like Colorado. So I too have learned something today on Professor Weed Wednesdays. So Jordan, thank you again for joining us.
Awesome. No, thank you. Anytime.
All right. And we're down to our last show coming up on Friday, 4 to 6 p.m. The Green Rush, the business of cannabis. David Rabinovich will be alongside. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I thank you for watching. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly, and we'll see you on Friday.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, welcome back to the final half hour of Cannabis Chat for this Medicinal Monday. I'm Jimmy Young from the Pro Cannabis Media Studios, and I am joined as usual on Mondays with Alyssa Merrill, the founder of flowerandtonic.com. And we are so happy to welcome in Dr. Eric Ruby into our interview Zoom room. Dr. Eric Ruby, thank you so much for joining us here on Medicinal Monday.
Pleasure to be here.
And actually, it's not our first time meeting because you were part of a historic live stream that I was involved with in July of 2019. And here we are, over a year later, still getting the word out and talking about cannabis as a medicinal product. Now, your story, I'm very comfortable talking about your story, but I've always felt that the people who have the story should tell it. You have a very personal reason why you were introduced to cannabis, and you saw how powerful it was used as a medicine. Can you relate the story to us about your son?
Yes, 20 years ago, we received a phone call in the middle of the night that no parent wants to ever get, that your son is in the emergency room. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Can you come down to New York now? We found out that my son was hit by a car and he was paralyzed. They knew it right away. And for about a year, he had significant central neuropathic pain. And he was on analgesics, opioids, and well-meaning physicians in the Boston area and New York area ended up causing him a great amount of problems with those medications. He became suicidal, and things were not doing well. And then one day he came to me and said, Dad, that pain that's 9 out of 10 all the time, central neuropathic pain, phantom pain, it's going away. I said, well, what'd you do? And his statement was, I've been smoking with my friend and the pain's going away. I said, well, that's great, but you can't use marijuana in Massachusetts. You'll get arrested. The prisons are not exactly wheelchair friendly. You're going to have to move to Colorado or California. And when he announced to me and to his mother at that time that he was moving to Colorado, she almost killed me because when you're paralyzed, you don't move halfway, 2,000 miles away. But he spent 3 years in Colorado learning what he needed. He got off all of his addicting opioids and he was able to use a lot of CBD, and not as much THC. Over the course of time, he's been actually he with the amount of money he received from being hit by that car, he was in a crosswalk with a green light, and it was totally the person's fault. He was able to buy a grow facility, and he learned. He brought his team back to Connecticut, and he was the first licensed grow facility in Connecticut. He's doing very well. It's an 80,000 foot grow facility now, and he's still #1 in Connecticut. So seeing what happened to him and researching it for 15 years while he was doing all this. When Massachusetts opened up for medicinal cannabis, I signed on, and that was 5 years ago. But in 5 years, the American Academy of Pediatrics, although they have a policy that if no other modality works, cannabis is to be accepted as treatment. So I have been seeing families for 5 years, and the problems have ranged from pain to epilepsy to Crohn's disease, significant amounts of anxiety with people who have tried black market cannabis and really need better direction. So when you fill out the forms, and they used to be 27 pages, I always show, when I give a lecture, I always show the Constitution of the United States is, I hold it up, and it's a little pamphlet, and it's about 12 pages. But the DPH regulations, I hold that up, it's 57 pages. So there's a little bit of a disconnect. It wasn't easy to get the medicinal part going, and the recreational part also has been a bear. But I can tell you, after a 9.5-hour meeting of the Mass Medical Society on Saturday, Zoom, we came up with a policy that now does allow for, initially the MMS was totally against all cannabis. They called it marijuana. It was radioactive plutonium. Doctors who utilized it were told by the lawyers, you're going to get arrested, you're going to lose your license, you're going to put you in jail, you're going to be fined. All of that was, we could call, false news. That's not what happens. If you go by the book, if you do the regulations, if you are conscientious, you can prescribe cannabis, or I should say you can certify a patient. And once that patient is certified, you can advise and consult on the proportions and the milligrams. And it is right now, that policy from the MMS stresses research and education. And now nothing in that policy says marijuana. It's all cannabis. So they're trying to get rid of the stigma. And that was something that I worked out with the chair of the Public Health Department, Public Health Committee. It was after everything was vetted. We vetted it through the Legislative Committee, which I'm on, and the Education Committee. So this is a very, very good policy, which is significantly more liberal than we've ever had before. I was hoping I would see it in the Globe on Monday, but the meeting went all day Saturday, and I don't know what's happened for Sunday anyway. But I'm getting the full information, and I will disseminate it to various places so that the public knows that the doctors in the Mass Medical Society are now going to be on board much more than they were. So I've talked for, sorry,
No.
11 minutes, and I think I should open it up to whatever you want.
Well, first of all, thank you for breaking that story. That is great news. And it's funny. Sometimes when you retire, this is what I hear. Oh, wait, I've got to stroke this monitor. Hang on. Magic. Sometimes when you retire, you discover that you're actually more important than you were when you were actually keeping office hours and seeing patients regularly. I mean, you're retired now, right?
Well, yes. The issue is, though, they wanted to throw a retirement party for me. And I said, I've had a party every day for 43 years.
Oh, that's nice.
And I'm writing in a journal, and it says in the journal, what do you want to do today? And I wrote down, I want to see patients. That's what I do. So it just was, I told my staff in the summertime, we don't have treatment for COVID. We don't have a vaccine for COVID. And my staff has been with me for 35, 40 years, almost all of them. So we're all over 65. And I said, we are lucky so far. We're seeing 20 kids a day because you can't do immunizations virtually. 20 kids a day, 20 parents a day. Everybody has their temperature taken. Everybody says they haven't been exposed. And since March, we've had to close the office down twice because of COVID exposures, and everybody has to get tested.
Right.
This is a terrible situation. I gave a presentation to the Taunton Board of Health. Taunton Education Department, pardon me. The superintendent of schools had a paper that I wrote, and I said, get good on being virtual.
Right.
Because you're going to send them back to school, and 2 weeks later, they're going to be home again. And if you're doing it hybrid, 2 days there and 2 days not, that's still the same exposures for the teachers. And my patients are teachers too, and they don't want to teach, at least not face-to-face. This is dangerous.
Right.
And look at the numbers. I think Charlie Baker's done a pretty good job. I think he's kind of afraid to be a little more specific, but he really should be, because with the numbers going up, so I told my staff, I'm stopping October 30th, because then you're going to have Halloween, then you're going to have Thanksgiving, then you're going to have Christmas, and everybody's going back to school. So guess what's going to happen? And it's here. And I didn't need a crystal ball to figure that one out. And neither did all of our leadership at public health. And I was very excited to hear that medical schools applications are way up because of the Fauci effect. And I just hope people understand medical school's tough. You got to work hard. And a good example of that is the fact that we had a 9.5-hour meeting of the Mass Medical Society, and nobody wanted to cut it short. And we kept going. We took a half an hour for lunch and 2 10-minute breaks, and we kept going and going and going, and everybody stayed. There were 200 people who were on this virtual meeting, about 160 at the end. But that's the commitment that you have to have for medicine. So I'm glad there's a Fauci effect, but I think that we need the people to realize masks are important. 6-foot distancing is important. Washing your hands is important. And the crowds, I'm not a religious person, I'm a spiritual person, but I can't imagine a religious leader who would jeopardize his flock to preach the gospel and then have it be a super spreader event. That is, God is not going to protect them from COVID. God gave us COVID. Now we have to do something about it. So I'm getting a little bit off of cannabis.
It's okay.
But I can tell you that if you smoke it or vape it, probably not a great idea right now, since COVID does affect the lungs. And I would be much more in favor of concentrates and oils and pills and edibles. It is metabolized differently, and you will get a different effect. So it's going to take time to figure out how it's working. It's always start low, go slow. And when you change from one medication to another, you got to be careful.
Can I ask you, getting back to the COVID, and as a pediatrician, I have 3 young kids, and I used to sell Ritalin as a pharmaceutical rep. So I think the thing that's coming to me nonstop is like parents want to put their kids on medication right now, like it's not going great at home. And I realize we have to be home and this is the safe place to be. I strongly believe that, CBD is a better alternative than Xanax for a kid or Ritalin. I'm curious as a physician, like, are you seeing a lot more cases that you're looking as for anxiety as more of an option than it was previously, or how are you feeling? Because I think there's some mixed reviews on that topic.
Well, you bring in a lot of thoughts here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or attention deficit disorder, we're talking about a kid who is very active, that's the hyperactivity, or very non-focused. But in children who are anxious become very non-focused and very active. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So although it's operationally defined as attention deficit disorder, attention hyperactivity disorder, what is the etiology? Is it truly a problem with learning and reception of information and processing? Or is it a child who is so distracted and so upset and suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, or suffering from the disorder that right now all his parents and her parents are going through?
Yeah, my yelling at your kids.
So we're really treating ADHD probably too much with medication and not looking to the real basis of it. So when you talk about CBD decreases the anxiety and allows the child to focus better and allows the child to calm down. So I'm much in favor of trying 5 milligrams or 10 milligrams or 15 milligrams, start low, go slow, and do it once a day or twice a day or 3 times a day. There is not a problem with CBD. The only issue I say is please get Rick Simpson's oil or Charlotte's Web or palmetto oil, or something that tells you that it is a full spectrum and not a broad spectrum. Please have that 0.3 of THC in it so you get the entourage effect. What you're buying at the gasoline station is broad spectrum, not full spectrum.
And you believe that 0.3% THC is enough to make that CBD, the entourage effect, work to its utmost effect?
No.
Thank you.
You do need a little bit more.
Thank you.
And that's where getting a certification comes in.
Right.
Now, CBD is still nutritional. CBD is still allowable. I would say you have to walk gently if the teachers are going to know about it, because you don't want DCF coming down on you. And if you're telling everybody that I'm giving my child CBD, it's not going to work. Not yet.
It's still,
wait till the principals start and the superintendents start on CBD. Have quality control. That's what the Cannabis Control Commission is all about. But there's a lot of CBD that doesn't get tested. And, we do what works. And I call it trial and success. And Bonnie Goldstein's book, and you really have to read Bonnie Goldstein's book. She's a pediatrician in California. It's called Cannabis Revealed. It's in the second edition now. And she said the reason that people fail cannabis, meaning either THC or CBD, is they don't give themselves enough time with it, and they don't push it enough to higher dosages. And pushing CBD, no problem. 5, 10, 15, 25, even 3 times a day, even for children, not a problem. Pushing THC, again, that's where the American Academy of Pediatrics keeps on saying you're going to damage the brain. But in actuality, the symptomatology of THC issues, meaning memory problems, executive functioning, judgment, coordination. You take a look at all of my teenagers who go to school at 7:15 in the morning. They have the identical profile of somebody using cannabis incorrectly. In other words, they're all sleep deprived. And if we don't get the Board of Education to say, delay school start times, it is unconscionable that the bus company has more power than the educational department. Wrong. I mean, Boston passed it and unanimously, and 2,000 parents say you can't do this to us. But you know what? They're doing it to their kids. They want the best education for their kids. Then send the kid to school when he's conscious.
Right.
Because at 7:15 in the morning, adolescents physiologically are unconscious.
Guess what's so sad though, Dr. Ruby, is my daughter has to wake up and get on her Zoom at 7 a.m. So even when they're doing hybrid days in their home, they still have to wake up. So I wish I met you before. I've been in this, and this is what's so unfortunate. And what I don't like about this industry is how hard it is to find the experts. And it took me this long to find you. Like I, to be quite honest, I was a pharmaceutical rep. I knew a lot of pediatricians. I've never met you before. And how that's a challenge that we face. Like how
I don't advertise.
I know you can't, right? Well, no, that's
I don't want to.
Oh, okay. But I mean, what do we do as parents? Like, it's just hard. How do you find, like I'm trying to direct people to the best doctors and clinicians, but yeah, like it took a long time to find you. So.
I volunteered for the Mass chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics to give a lecture to the other pediatricians. They said, we don't want it. There's still stigma. And there's, medicine is called lifelong learning. And a physician who refuses to learn about cannabis, I mean, when I talk to the internists, the family practice people, almost all their patients at one time or another are trying cannabis, and they better understand the interaction of cannabis with the proprietary medications. I mean, when we talk CBD, we are talking interference with liver metabolism. So you really have to know who's on what, particularly when you're treating epilepsy, because you can inadvertently make the AEDs higher than they should be. So you do have to lower things. I haven't seen it, but theoretically, it's certainly possible.
Absolutely.
You just had a
Well, we have 3 minutes, so I don't know.
God, Dr. Ruby, I could talk to you for an hour, but I want to go back to the meeting you just had with your Mass Medical Society, and you had 200 physicians on this. It was a 9.5-hour meeting. I took notes on what you said, and you said they've now taken the word marijuana out of their documentation and have replaced it with cannabis. Are they becoming a little bit more, at least inquisitive about the powers of the plant?
I didn't take a poll, but some of them asked me about it. And I said, the more, see, this is what happens. The patients get smarter than the doctors.
Right.
Because the patients talk to the bud tenders. The patients talk to each other. The patients go online. The patients research their diseases and they research their treatments. Right. And the doctors are too busy. Right. So doctors feel very uncomfortable when their patients know more about their disease and their medicine than the doctor does. So you ask me, are the doctors getting involved? Their answer is, I don't know enough about it. There's not enough research and I can't recommend it.
Right.
And that was a poll that was done. And I quoted that one when I gave my testimony, that over 50% of doctors are either unfamiliar or not knowledgeable.
Right. Wow. Wow.
Well, you're going to be busy in your retirement because I'll help you spread the word if you would be so kind.
Well, I have to write to my office, and the office is 35 Summer Street, 35 Summer in Taunton.
All right.
02780, because that's how I'm doing it right now. I
you got it.
Have to pull things together. And once December 31st rolls around, the new year and new thoughts. Or you can fax me. I do faxes. Faxes are 508-880-9897. 508.
I love old school. I love the old school, Dr. Ruby.
I get lost on Zoom. I get lost on email. I'm 120 emails behind half the time.
You're like a natural. This has been a wonderful interview. Like, thank you so much.
I got to tell you, I'll write you another personal email. Thank you, because I tell you, I have so much respect for what you do, what you continue to do. And the fact that you retired and you're still making yourself available because you recognize that your knowledge can help people and help parents. And I just think that's a wonderful thing. I wish we had more doctors like you, Dr. Eric Ruby.
Well, I told you what my patients call me. You see, Ruby. They call me a gem of a doctor.
A gem of a doctor. I love it. And you don't want to advertise? You don't want to brand that?
But what about your son? I imagine he makes an amazing product, or is that something that, does he have CBD products or that we can buy? He has both. Okay.
He has both. Right. He's in Connecticut, and you can, I'm not, he doesn't want me to talk about him, so.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, you do a great job of balancing what you talk about and what you don't. And again, I give you tons of credit. Thank you so much for coming on today at last moment. And as usual, you have.
I'm retired. I can do it the last minute.
I understand, but you said you're even busier now that you're in retirement. You took 9.5 hours on a Saturday to listen to your former comrades. You're still your comrades. So you're not retired. You've just taken a bit of a break, if you will. Or
moving it's a different direction. Let's put it that way. It's not direct patient care all the time, but I have a number of interests, and I will pursue them.
There you go. Well, good luck with that. I so appreciate you joining us again. Dr. Eric Ruby from Taunton, Massachusetts, making tremendous impressions on all of us here at Pro Cannabis Media continuing. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. We're going to wrap things up here. And Alyssa, I mean, we had three super interviews, and that's what we love to do here on Pro Cannabis Media. We really do want to become a forum for the stories that we're hearing on a regular basis, because they're just not being heard enough by traditional media. That's why I founded Pro Cannabis Media, and that's what will continue. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.